At the family dinner, my mom said, "She's still single, that's why she takes care of our bills." I stood up, slid a contract on the table, and said, "This house? Sold. You have 30 days." Hi, my name is Callie Monroe, and for 36 years, I tried to be the kind of daughter my family could rely on. I showed up. I paid the bills. I smiled at holidays even when they hurt. I answered late night calls, fixed financial messes, and never once asked for anything back. My mother always said I was the responsible one, but what she really meant was I was the one they could use, until the night she said it out loud. And laughed. It was a Sunday evening dinner at my parents' house, my brother Jason's birthday. I'd paid for the catering as usual. I'd paid the utility bill that month too, again, as usual. The whole family was there. My mom Sandra, my dad Robert, my unemployed brother Jason, my smug uncle Gerald, and even Jason's new girlfriend who barely spoke but had already taken my seat at the table without asking. I stood behind my chair with a bottle of wine in my hand, smiling because that's what I was trained to do. I told myself this time would be different. I'd promised myself no more quiet swallowing of insults, no more clapping for people who wouldn't clap for me, but I didn't expect it to hit so hard, or so publicly. The dinner was fine at first, meaning it was the usual performance. Jason talked about starting a podcast, even though he hadn't worked in 2 years. My uncle Gerald leaned back in his chair like he was holding court, making everyone listen to his outdated opinions. My father said little, just nodded, chewing slowly. And my mother? She was at her best, hovering, pouring wine, criticizing the caterer she hadn't paid for. Then came the moment. Jason had just finished telling a story about his potential sponsorship deal, which, as usual, was a lie I didn't bother correcting. My uncle turned to my mother and said with a smirk, "You're lucky Callie takes care of everything, huh?" My mother didn't miss a beat. She smiled, lifted her glass, and said, "Well, she's still single. That's why she takes care of our bills." The table erupted in laughter. Jason chuckled, shaking his head. Gerald made some joke about cat food and crossword puzzles. Even my dad smirked into his drink like it was some harmless observation. Only the girlfriend looked vaguely uncomfortable, but she didn't say a word. Me? I froze. It was one of those moments where time slows down. My hand was still on the wine bottle. My smile hadn't yet faded, but my soul had. They laughed like it was a punchline, like my sacrifices were comedic material, like the very real hours I poured into supporting that home, financially, emotionally, were nothing more than symptoms of romantic failure. I wasn't surprised, not really. My mother had always measured success by weddings and grandchildren, not pay stubs or degrees, not loyalty or emotional strength, but something inside me cracked, clean and final. I set the wine bottle down slowly, walked to my purse at the edge of the counter, unzipped it without looking at anyone, and pulled out a manila folder that had been waiting for that moment for weeks. They didn't notice at first. They were still laughing, still clinking glasses. Then I stepped back to the table, slid the folder right in front of my mother's plate, looked her directly in the eyes, my voice calm and deliberate. "This house?" I said. "Sold. You have 30 days. Everything stopped. Her laugh died mid-breath. Gerald's face froze. Jason stared at me like I'd spoken another language. My father sat up straighter, eyes narrowed, like he didn't quite understand what he'd just heard. My mother blinked. "What is this?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She opened the folder. Inside was a fully executed contract. Property transfer, finalized sale, 30-day possession timeline, signatures, my signature, her name nowhere on the title, and a bank stamp that said complete. Her fork dropped onto the plate with a dull clink. She started to read and her hand began to shake, because in that moment, she wasn't looking at a joke, or a single daughter, or an ATM with a pulse. She was looking at the new reality. The house wasn't hers. It hadn't been for years. And now, it wasn't even mine. Because I'd sold it, and when she read the buyer's name, someone she once tried to shame in front of the church for wearing red to a funeral, she knew she had no leverage, no legal ground, and no place to run. I didn't say another word. I didn't have to. I'd finally spoken the only language they understood. Ownership, and that was just the beginning. If you'd asked anyone in my family who I was growing up, they would have said I was the good daughter. The quiet one, the planner, the helper, the one who never made trouble, who always had perfect attendance, and who gave up things so others didn't have to. They never said I was smart or strong or successful, because to them, those things didn't matter. What mattered was that I wasn't married. No kids, no diamond on my hand, and in Sandra Monroe's world, my mother's world, that meant I was unfinished. Never mind that I had a master's degree in finance, a six-figure job at a firm in downtown Atlanta, and a pristine credit score. None of that held any weight compared to my cousin Macy's 3 kids and the $400 a week she made doing lashes out of her basement. To my mom, Macy was accomplished. I was just Callie. But I wasn't always this cynical. In fact, I spent most of my 20s convincing myself that the judgment in her eyes was just concern, that the passive-aggressive remarks were her way of motivating me, that someday, when I bought her a house, paid off her car, saved Jason's financial mess for the 3rd time, she'd finally look at me with pride instead of pity. But that moment never came. Let me paint a picture. I was 27 when my father, Robert, had a stroke. Mild, but enough to shake the family. Jason was living at home after dropping out of college for the 2nd time, and I had just bought my first condo with my own savings. Mom called crying, saying they were behind on mortgage payments and might lose the house. She didn't ask outright, she never did, but the implication was clear. You don't have kids, you don't have a husband. Can you help just this once? Just this once turned into 8 years. 8 years of covering their mortgage, then taking over the refinance under my name just for the interest rate. 8 years of paying property taxes, maintenance, utilities. 8 years of dinners where I was asked when I'd finally settle down while Jason sat across from me jobless, rent-free, and unbothered. I remember one Christmas where I gave Mom a brand new oven for the kitchen. She opened it, smiled politely, and then said in front of everyone, "You know, if you gave me grandbabies instead of appliances, I'd be even happier." The room laughed. I did too. I always did. But I felt that sting under my skin, that sense of shrinking even as I poured out more and more of myself. Jason, for all his flaws, was adored. He could fail forward endlessly and still be the center of every family gathering, and maybe part of me let it happen because I wanted to keep the peace. I wanted to believe my efforts mattered, but by the time I turned 35, something in me began to shift. I had spent years building a life of my own in secret. I wasn't flashy. I didn't post about it online, but I'd invested wisely, saved, planned. I had a growing stock portfolio, a rental property out of state, and the full title to my parents' house sitting in a drawer in my office. Yes, title. See, when I refinanced their home to lower the interest rate, the house had to go into my name legally. At the time, my mother waved it off like it didn't mean anything. "It's still our house," she'd said. "We just need your credit to help us out." I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I signed. I paid. And that made it mine. But I never used that leverage. I never rubbed it in. I still let them live as if nothing had changed. Because deep down, I hoped that one day they'd see me as more than just the daughter who picked up the slack. That day never came. In fact, the older I got, the more they ridiculed me for being unmarried. My mother would introduce me as her independent daughter, with an almost apologetic tone. Jason joked I'd be buried with my spreadsheets. Uncle Gerald once asked me if I'd considered freezing my eggs at Thanksgiving, and I let it slide. Again and again until the week of that dinner. The buyer, Mrs. Henderson, a sweet widow looking to move closer to her grandkids, had signed the offer on Monday. I finalized the paperwork on Wednesday. By Friday, the house was officially sold. All that remained was the 30-day possession clause, just long enough for my family to pack their things, but I hadn't told them yet. I was going to wait until after the dinner. I even rehearsed how I'd say it gently, privately, without causing a scene. But when my mother laughed at me, laughed for still being single and paying the bills, I realized there was no point in protecting people who'd never protected me. She wanted to mock the one person keeping that roof over their heads. Then she'd feel what it was like to lose it. That's when I knew. This wasn't going to be a private conversation. This was going to be a reckoning, and it was long overdue. The week leading up to Jason's birthday dinner was chaotic, but I moved through it with a strange sense of calm, like I was watching it all unfold from a distance. I met with my attorney, signed the final set of closing documents, and wired the funds. I scheduled the buyer's home inspection and made sure the 30-day notice clause was properly drafted. All of it felt surreal, like I was preparing for a quiet revolution, one that only I knew was coming. But beneath the surface, my stomach churned with something I couldn't ignore: guilt. Because no matter how much they used me, no matter how many cruel jabs they made, a part of me still wanted their approval. I still wanted my mother to one day say, "I'm proud of you." The night before the dinner, I had dinner with my best friend, Renee. We'd been friends since college. She was one of the few people who truly knew how much I'd done for my family. Over sushi and wine, I finally told her what I'd done. "I sold the house," I said, almost casually, like I was confessing to buying a new pair of shoes I didn't need. She blinked. "You did what?" "I sold it. Closed the deal yesterday. They have 30 days to vacate." Renee stared at me in silence, then whispered, "You really did it." I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settle into my bones. They think I'm just a bank account with a heartbeat. I've paid for everything, without a thank you, without recognition, and definitely without love. It's time they understand what happens when you take people for granted. Renee didn't try to talk me out of it. She just reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said, "They've been cashing in on your silence for years. Maybe it's time they pay the cost." I slept surprisingly well that night. But the next morning, the nerves returned. I arrived at the family house early to help set up because that's what I always did. I arranged the cake, lit candles, unpacked dishes. My mom didn't even greet me properly. She just pointed to a pile of takeout boxes and said, "Can you plate these? It looks nicer for pictures." Not thank you, not hi, just plate this. Jason showed up 2 hours late, no explanation. Just walked in like a celebrity entering his own party. Mom lit up like a Christmas tree. "There's my birthday boy," she squealed, kissing his cheek, completely ignoring the fact that I'd been the one carrying this dinner from the start. Uncle Gerald followed, loud as ever. "Callie, still working 80 hours a week, huh? When are you going to let a man take care of you?" I smiled politely and offered him a drink. I didn't engage. That used to be my coping mechanism. Stay pleasant, keep the peace, let them say what they want. But something about that day felt different. My hands were steady, my chest light, because I knew something none of them did. I had the power now. Real, legal, unstoppable power. And I wasn't afraid to use it. Dinner was served. The table was loud, filled with clinking glasses and fake stories. My father sat at the head, carving a store-bought turkey breast like it was a holiday feast. Mom bragged about Jason's new business venture, which I knew was code for, "He bought a domain name last week." Everyone nodded like he'd invented Amazon. Then came the moment. Uncle Gerald raised his glass. To Jason, still young, still handsome, still the favorite child. Everyone laughed. My mom chimed in, swirling her wine. And to Callie, who's still single, still generous, and still paying all our bills. That line, that one line, it wasn't just a joke. It was the culmination of everything they believed about me. That I was less because I didn't have a husband. That my worth was tied to my relationship status. That my usefulness was more important than my dignity. The laughter stung. Not because I hadn't heard worse, but because of who it came from. My own mother. The woman whose mortgage I'd paid every month, who hadn't worked a day in 10 years, who asked me to cover her property taxes every winter, like it was a favor I should be honored to perform. I looked at her and realized something simple and horrifying. She didn't love me for who I was. She loved me for what I gave. And suddenly all the years of resentment, sacrifice, emotional labor, it all crystallized into one electric decision, no more. I stood up, reached for my purse on the sideboard. The table fell quiet, some thinking I was going to leave early again, like I had at Thanksgiving 2 years ago when Gerald told me I'd missed my window. Instead, I turned, walked calmly to my mother's seat, and placed a folder in front of her plate. Everyone watched, silent. "This house?" I said clearly, making sure every single person heard me. "Sold. You have 30 days." My mom blinked, confused. "What is this?" But I didn't respond. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. She opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the first page, and then her expression began to shift. Her hands trembled. Her lips parted, but no words came out. That's when the room changed. No one laughed. No one made a sound. Because they were watching the world they knew fall apart, and they had no idea how close it had been to breaking this entire time. The moment the folder hit the table, I felt the atmosphere shift like thunder rolling in from a clear sky. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't second-guessing. I wasn't looking for approval anymore. I'd already made peace with my decision long before I stepped into that house. What I felt now was something new. Calm, power even. The kind that comes when you stop begging for people to treat you right and start enforcing the boundary they never thought you'd draw. My mother stared at the document like it had been written in another language. Her fork lay forgotten on the plate, a speck of gravy still clinging to its edge. My brother leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the contract. "What is this? Is this some kind of joke?" "No," I said simply. "It's a real estate sales agreement. The house is sold. Closing already happened. You all have 30 days to move." Uncle Gerald gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "You can't be serious. You're kicking your own parents out of their home?" "My home," I corrected, looking directly at him. "Check the title. It's been in my name since the refinance. They knew that. They just thought I'd never use it." My father sat up straighter, finally beginning to understand. "Wait a minute," he said, his voice low. "You sold it without telling us?" "No," I replied, still calm. "I sold it because you never listened when I told you how tired I was. When I asked for some respect. When I said I couldn't keep doing everything alone. You all ignored me. You laughed at me. You let her humiliate me at this table, and I'm done." My mom finally found her voice. "You did this over a joke? Callie, you're being dramatic." "Am I?" I asked. "Because I've paid your mortgage, your electric bills, your property taxes, your insurance, for almost a decade. I've sacrificed relationships, vacations, milestones. I've been the backbone of this house since the day Dad got sick, and the one time you publicly acknowledge it, you turn it into a punchline. So no, this isn't about a joke. It's about every single moment that came before it." My brother scoffed. "So now what? We're just supposed to pack up and go live on the street?" "You're 33, Jason. Maybe it's time." The silence after that hit different. He looked stunned, like no one had ever said that to him before. Probably because no one ever had. Our mother had protected him from consequences his entire life, and I had helped her do it. But not anymore. That folder didn't just contain a real estate transaction. It contained freedom from guilt, from emotional debt, from a role I had never agreed to but had somehow been forced to play. I remembered sitting in the lawyer's office 2 weeks earlier, staring at the draft contract. I hadn't even planned to sell the house originally. I'd just gone in to ask about transferring ownership, maybe putting it back in their names now that things were stable. But the second I said it out loud, something in me shifted. My lawyer, a blunt, no-nonsense woman named Celine, looked me in the eye and said, "Why? So they can keep taking from you without consequence?" That sentence lived in my mind for days, and then I made the decision. I contacted a realtor, listed the house quietly, and found a cash buyer within 5 days, a retired woman named Eleanor, looking for a new start. Her offer was clean. Her intentions were kind. She even cried when she saw the backyard, said it reminded her of her childhood. I liked her instantly. I told her she'd be a better steward of this home than the people currently living in it. Celine handled the paperwork. I wired the funds into a new account. And for the first time in years, I looked at my bank statement and didn't feel like I was bleeding for someone else's comfort. Now at the table, I watched my mother's face slowly crumple. She tried to salvage the moment with guilt. "We're your parents, Callie. How could you do this to us?" "You did this to yourselves," I replied. "You turned me into a workhorse, then laughed when I carried the weight. I never wanted to be your landlord, but you made me one, and now the lease is up." Uncle Gerald spoke again, louder now. "You think this makes you strong? It makes you heartless." I looked him dead in the eyes. "You don't get to talk about heart, not when you've sat at this table for years and watched me be belittled while doing the heavy lifting. If you cared so much, you can offer them your guest room." He didn't respond, because bullies are only brave when they think their target won't fight back. After a long, quiet beat, my father pushed his chair back and walked out of the dining room. Jason sat in stunned silence as if waiting for someone to fix the moment, to make it go back to the way things had always been. But that time had passed. I picked up my glass, finished the last sip of wine, and stood tall. "You have 30 days," I said again. "The buyer takes possession on the 1st. The documents are real. You can confirm them with the county clerk." And with that, I turned and walked out the front door, without looking back. I walked out of that house and didn't check my phone for 2 full days. Not a text, not a call, not even a glance at my voicemail. I needed space. I needed silence. After 36 years of being the family's emotional, financial, and logistical first responder, I was giving myself permission to finally breathe. But my family, they were spiraling. By the time I turned my phone back on, I had 17 missed calls from my mother, 5 from my father, and 2 from a number I didn't recognize. Jason had texted twice. "We need to talk." "This isn't funny, Callie." Funny, as if any of this had ever been a joke to me. I didn't respond. I went to work, ate lunch alone on a park bench, cleaned my apartment while listening to old jazz records I hadn't touched in years. It felt like I was slowly reclaiming pieces of myself that had been buried under years of duty and guilt, but I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. 3 days after the dinner, I got the call I'd been waiting for, from Celine, my lawyer. "The buyer's walkthrough is complete, no issues, transfers confirmed. Possession will officially change hands on the 1st. It was done. The house wasn't theirs anymore. It wasn't even mine. It belonged to someone who saw it as a home, not a free ride." And that's when the phone rang again. This time, I answered. "Callie?" My mother's voice was strained, almost unrecognizable. "Please, we need to talk. Can you come by the house?" I paused, then said, "No. But I'll meet you at Renee's Cafe tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. public place." She agreed. When I arrived the next day, she was already sitting at a corner table, hands clasped tightly in front of her. My father sat beside her, eyes downcast. He looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow. My mother was trying to wear dignity like armor, but I could see the fear under her carefully painted face. "Callie," she said as I sat, "we didn't know you were serious." I didn't answer. I just waited. "We thought you'd come to your senses, that you'd change your mind." My father finally looked up. "30 days is not enough. We can't find a place that fast. What are we supposed to do?" I let the silence hang in the air. Then I said, "You've had 8 years to prepare. 8 years of me paying the bills while you told people I was pathetic for not having a husband. 8 years of me being the reason you still had a roof, and never once did you thank me. Not sincerely, not once." My mother's lip quivered. "You're punishing us." "No," I said quietly. "I'm freeing myself." She shifted in her seat, grasping for something to hold on to. "But why now? Why like this?" I leaned forward, because I sat at that dinner table and listened to my own mother mock me in front of people I paid to feed. "You laughed at me for being single, for taking care of the bills." As if those things made me less. "But I've realized something, Mom. Being alone isn't the same as being empty." I was empty sitting at that table. Not anymore. She looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she pulled something out of her purse. A small envelope. I stared at it. She slid it across the table. "Just look, please." I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Her handwriting shakier than I remembered. "Callie, I don't know how to make this right. I won't pretend I didn't hurt you. I did. You carried more than you should have, and I made you feel small for it. I told myself you didn't need praise or love or recognition. But you did, and you still do. I'm sorry. I don't know if that means anything now, but I am." I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope. "Thank you," I said. "But the sale stands, the deadline stands." My mother nodded, slowly. My father reached out to touch her hand. For once, she didn't pull away. And I stood up. "I hope you find peace in your next place," I said, "but it won't be mine anymore." As I walked out of the cafe, I felt something shift in me, something final but not cold. A door had closed, and not in anger, in clarity. They would have to start over, so would I. On the first of the next month, I returned to the house one last time, only this time as a visitor. The driveway was empty, the front porch was bare. The old wind chimes I'd bought my mom for her 50th birthday were gone. The yard had been mowed for the first time in months. Eleanor greeted me with a hug at the front door. "Feels like home already," she smiled. I looked around. For years, I'd seen this place as a symbol of burden, a monument to everything I'd given and never gotten back. Now it was a fresh start, for someone who would treat it with love. I handed Eleanor a housewarming card with a little gift inside, a $500 gift card for home repairs. And then I left. I didn't look back. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive like a parade. It comes quietly, no confetti, no dramatic music, just stillness, an absence of fear, of resentment, of obligation. That's what my life became after I sold the house. For the first few weeks, I expected to feel guilt, regret, some lingering ache. But all I felt was lightness, like I'd taken off a coat I didn't realize I was wearing for 20 years. My phone stopped ringing every time a bill was due. There were no more late-night texts from my mother saying things like, "Your father forgot to pay the gas bill again. Can you just handle it?" No more emails from Jason forwarding a Venmo request for car repairs, followed by a winking emoji. No more dinners where I sat smiling through ridicule just so no one felt uncomfortable about my independence. They weren't just removed from the house. They were removed from the grip they had on my time, my energy, my identity. And with the silence came something unexpected. Space. Space to ask myself questions I hadn't dared ask before. What do I want? What kind of people do I want around me? What does home mean when it isn't filled with obligation? It started small. I joined a local community gardening group, signed up for a weekend photography class, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. Renee and I started taking weekend trips, exploring parts of the state we'd never bothered with. I saw my life not as a list of tasks to complete, but as a blank canvas. For the first time, I began to paint it with color. The money from the sale? I didn't blow it. I used some to buy a modest duplex not far from where I live. I rented out the second unit to a young couple expecting their first baby. They remind me of the people my family never were: grateful, humble, kind. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was emotional. Because for the first time, I wasn't shrinking myself to make others feel taller, and that changed everything. A few months after the move, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph, an old one. Me, maybe 6 years old, sitting in the yard of the house I'd just sold. My dad behind me holding a sprinkler. My mom in the background with a pitcher of lemonade. On the back, in the same handwriting from the letter she'd given me at the cafe, were 6 words. "We didn't see you, I'm sorry." There was no signature, just that. I sat with it for a while, and for the first time I realized I didn't need them to see me anymore, because I saw myself, clearly. I folded the photo, slipped it into a memory box, and moved on. I still get asked sometimes, mostly by distant relatives or old friends from school, "Do you talk to your family?" The answer is, not really. We're cordial. My father sends me birthday messages. My mother has tried to call a few times, especially around the holidays. But there's a distance between us now, one that was always there. But now I've stopped pretending to bridge it alone. Jason never reached out after the move. Last I heard, he was staying with Gerald, trying to figure things out. I'm sure someone else is footing the bill now. But that's no longer my concern, because I'm not their safety net anymore. I'm not the punchline to their jokes. And I'm not the invisible backbone holding up a house built on entitlement and manipulation. I'm just Callie Monroe, financial analyst, gardener, dog mom, owner of 2 rental properties, book club regular, still single, and completely, gloriously at peace with it. Because here's what I know now. Being alone doesn't mean being unloved. Having boundaries doesn't make you cruel. And walking away from people who only value you for what you give is the most loving thing you can do. For yourself. I didn't sell the house out of spite. I sold it because I was finally ready to stop buying their approval with my silence. And in that choice, I didn't lose a family, I reclaimed a life.